Okay, welcome to the town meeting program here on May 28th, a Thursday here in 2020. Such an unusual year, but there is very interesting news, which we are going to go over as a result of yesterday's city council meeting. Most notably, advancing the timetable for getting our local businesses back open faster. Not just willy-nilly like everything, completely the way it was before the pandemic started, but definitely more so than when everything was shut down. And we'll go over some of the parameters of that, along with a look at the mask rule as passed yesterday. It's still in place, but has been modified some to be a little bit broader and I think easier to understand. And if we have time, which I'm pretty sure we have, we'll also share the latest update from the Cordova School District Food Service Program, because they got an extension for what they've been offering over the fourth quarter of school, an extension to continue that process into August. And we're able to do all of it thanks to Cordova Wireless Communications, your local cell phone provider and wireless data provider. They provide your local talk show, which is available on demand. And they also, very importantly these days, keep the dollars that are spent with them in town. So they continue to recirculate. The estimates are, 7 times? Every time we spend a dollar locally, it changes hands at least 7 times, something like that. Not to mention the fact that CTC and Cordova Wireless between them continue to bring millions of outside dollars into Cordova because of how they operate, and all of those then circulate as well as they're passed on to employees and services are purchased and so forth. It's a pretty good deal to have them operating in the community. So, going into yesterday's council meeting, the plan was to consider a resolution to move our local business operations into a state of being synchronized with the rest of Alaska. You may recall last Friday, I think it was, that the Dunleavy administration announced they were going to pass over Phase 3. Remember, Phase 2 was sort of you think of it as like the 50% phase. Some businesses were operating at less than that, but in my shorthand, it was the 50% phase. There was then a Phase 3 that was the 75% phase, and then Phase 4 was the more 100% phase. And Dr. Zink and Commissioner Crum and Governor Dunleavy and everybody involved in the administration evidently looked at the numbers and the projections and thought, we don't really need to do Phase 3. We're just going to jump right ahead. So they did that last Friday. Cordova has a rule in place in our local emergency order where things that the state does don't necessarily take effect immediately. There's a maximum 10-day hold on at least a major change while our local experts review what the state is doing and make sure that it makes sense for Cordova, given the isolation and the influx of out-of-state population and the other things that we face, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. So that rule is there. And so they took their time to look at it, and the medical team made the recommendation to go ahead and proceed, originally with a June 1st implementation date. But the council looked at that and said, is there really any need to wait until June 1st? Why can't we just get going with it? And other than some concerns, which I don't think ended up being a problem, there were some concerns with the people responsible for getting that information out to the public. They were worried about whether they'd be able to do that in a timely fashion. But we jumped in with announcements that you've probably heard. We're running twice an hour, an announcement about the fact that right now, as we speak, in fact, that we're under the state's plan. And they put it on Facebook and got it out there. So I imagine most people know. All of you listening to this show know. So they moved it up from June 1st to this morning. And so we are officially now, like I said, in sync with the state as far as operating businesses in the reopening plan. Now, again, that doesn't mean, just willy-nilly everything is as it was prior to when this whole thing started. There is still some guidance in place from the state, and there is still the local mask rule in the emergency order, which we'll get into in a bit. Not to mention the fact that the businesses themselves are not required to open back up to the same level that the state allows. The individual businesses have complete freedom to choose whether they want masks to be mandatory. I mean, masks largely are mandatory anytime you can't be 6 feet away from somebody, but it's not in your household. But if any local business wants to make that restriction tighter, they can. If they don't want to open their doors and just do curbside only, they can. So, as many people have said, the folks that would like the decision-making regarding something like masks or other policies, are you going to have 25% capacity, 50%, 100%, whatever? There have been a number of folks that have expressed very strongly the view that they would rather leave that to the public instead of trying to police it through mandates. This move does that. It puts the choice, in terms of how the businesses operate, it puts a lot of the choice now in the hands of the business owners. And there have been repeated calls, by the way, for folks to understand and respect any restrictions that individual businesses keep in place, because each business owner is going to do its own risk assessment. If a business is concerned for its employees or its customers for whatever reason, then it makes sense for those that believe in the private sector and its ability to self-police. It makes sense for people to respect what those businesses do. And if a business has practices in place that you don't agree with, then you can shop elsewhere. And I mean, I've seen some people threatening to do that already. Well, if they're going to make me do such and such, then I'm going to go shop somewhere else. And you know what? That's America. That's fine. The marketplace will decide. Personally, we here at the radio station, continue to advocate for civility and working together. Not everybody will do that, but we still think that's the best way to go. So here is the general guidance from the state regarding this phase now that Cordova is in with its businesses. We'll share this with you, and then, as has been the case in the past, there are a number of specific sets of guidance for different types of operations, whether it's restaurants, personal care services, day camps, outdoor recreational facilities, all those different kinds of things. So if you want to look at the guidance for it, it'd take 30 hours to go over all that here. So we'll recommend that you look at those things on the state website. And again, the state website was not the best place to understand what Cordova's rules were. I mean, which phase of the reopening plan Cordova was in. The state had newer stuff posted when we were not in sync with them, but now that we are, all the stuff that you see there is the same. So if you go to covid19.alaska.gov and look at the Reopen Alaska Responsibly plan, which comes up there, it's right on the main page. You scroll down a little bit, you'll see it. Then you can see all of the specific attachments for the different sectors. But this is the general overall guidance when the state decided to move to this phase, which again is where Cordova is now. They said Alaska's done an excellent job of managing COVID-19. We responded quickly to an unknown threat to keep our cases low and ensure our healthcare systems had the increased capacity to deal with cases in the future. The base actions that led to our success will continue to be our playbook for the future, namely, stay 6 feet or more away from non-family members, wash your hands frequently, wipe down surfaces frequently, wear a face covering when in a public setting in close contact with others, stay home if you're sick and get tested for COVID-19 if you have symptoms, and be mindful and respectful to those Alaskans that are most vulnerable to this virus, those being our seniors, our elders, and those with existing health issues. Under Phases 1 and 2, businesses and organizations found new and creative ways to minimize the risk of COVID-19, and each day we're seeing new national and industry guidelines being released that provide guidance on safely operating. It is with the listed guidelines and safety advisories that we can empower businesses, organizations, and Alaskans to protect themselves and each other while continuing to open responsibly. Now is the time for the next phase of our response. To move ahead, we are combining our future phases while encouraging personal and organizational responsibility to safely operate while mitigating the spread of the disease. Make no mistake, the virus is with us. We must function with it and manage it. There will be folks who contract the virus and fall ill, but if we follow these guidelines, we can help lower potential risks and keep our way of life intact, with a few exceptions. The state, local communities, tribal partners, and healthcare providers have come together to do tremendous work. We built up our healthcare capacity to handle a potential increase in cases. We've increased screening and testing and continued to have robust contact tracing. We've trained our healthcare workers to safely work with and treat the virus. We've stockpiled and distributed PPE around the state. We will continue to monitor the situation daily, as we have since this virus arrived in Alaska, and we will adjust, if necessary, to handle a growth in case clusters to prevent cases from spiking. That's the language now that came out when the rest of the state moved to this phase Friday, and now here on Thursday, Cordova, this also applies to us. So, the way it works, all businesses can open, all houses of worship can open, libraries and museums can open, all recreational activities can open, all sports activities can open. But again, they say, and it's underlined here, it is the responsibility of individuals, businesses, and organizations now to minimize the spread of COVID-19. We encourage all to follow local, state, national, and industry guidelines on ways to conduct business and activities safely. Let me just interject here again that you'll notice that they have the word local in there. And in reaction to, the Facebook posts I occasionally see where someone will just say, make a blanket statement like, don't worry about the local rules. You can't have local rules. Just do what the state says. Again, that's not a factually correct statement. Local communities can and do, in many cases, not just Cordova, there are a number of local communities that have, in some cases, more restrictive rules, like Cordova still does, for example, with the mask rule. And obviously not everybody loves that, but it is there. The fact is that it's there. You can think what you want about it, but the rule is there and it's in force. And they reinforced that at the council meeting, that, while Mike Hicks has continued to say that the police and any authorities who have to confront somebody about violating one of the local rules, their initial goal will be education. But if you have somebody that is just either belligerent right from the beginning or they find is a repeat offender or something like that, then there are punishments. Fine up to $500, possible court appearances. It's a mandatory court appearance in some cases and possible in others, and I don't remember what it is. But I mean, those are things that if for people that just flat out are going to brazenly defy, not because of a lack of education, but if they're going to just brazenly defy local health rules, there is a potential financial consequence of that and a time consequence if you have to go to court. Again, I'm not saying that's right one way or the other or anything. Those are just the facts. That's the way it is. So again, the state is saying The key is following local, state, national, and industry guidelines on how to conduct business and activities safely. Now, the state does list some exceptions and restrictions and closures that are still in place from this wider state of being more open. First, the 14-day quarantine for out-of-state and international travel to Alaska remains in place. This will be reevaluated by June 2nd. They say that all senior centers, prisons, and institutions will continue to have restricted access. Any proposed large public gatherings like festivals or concerts need to consult first with public health before scheduling. And you might have heard that both the Tanana Valley State Fair in Fairbanks and the Alaska State Fair in Palmer have both been canceled. The state will continue to work with large industries to protect their workforce in the communities in which they operate. Communities may still elect to keep in place travel restrictions. See, that's another situation where the state is deferring to local communities who may think they need to be more careful. It goes on to say some Alaskan communities may wish to extend travel restrictions on non-essential travel into their communities for health reasons, so check with your local community. And then finally, Health Mandate 15 for elective medical and dental, Health Mandate 17 on commercial fishing, and Health Mandate 18 on intrastate travel, cities within Alaska. Those all remain in effect. And then finally, in this document, it says, because of you, Alaska, our statewide numbers remain low. We will keep our numbers low because of your actions. So again, the state's position clearly is transferring the responsibility of managing this from government mandates to individual responsibility, the individual businesses, the individual citizens, and so forth. So it's really in our hands to manage whether we have a spread or an outbreak or a spike or, whatever the potential options are. And from the standpoint of Cordova's leadership, one mechanism to do that is maintaining the facial covering rule, which is, if you want to look it up, Rule 15 in Cordova's emergency order. They revised that to the 8th version, and I was poking around at the website, the city website this morning, and I didn't see it, but I know that it's in the council packet from yesterday's meeting. So if you don't see it posted on the city's COVID site, you can read it, because it passed, the draft form in the packet passed pretty much as is, other than changing the date of the business reopening from June 1st to this morning. So the mask rule is still there, although it's been, I would say, improved. I think it is a little easier to understand in its current form. And here's a news release from the city to kind of clarify that. This came out yesterday. The 7-member representative body of the community of Cordova voted unanimously to bring Cordova nearly in line with the state's Reopen Alaska Responsibly plan, effective this morning at 8 a.m. A caveat was added based on recommendations of the medical team to keep the city temporary emergency COVID-19 rules in effect. So in other words, the emergency order, the provisions of the emergency order, and also amend Emergency Rule 15 on facial coverings, which will be in Emergency Order 2020-08. And here is a summary of Cordova's Emergency Order Rule 15 on facial coverings. Again, this is coming directly from the city news release. Except as otherwise provided in the facial covering rule, all individuals in Cordova must wear a mask, bandana, or other type of cloth protective covering over the nose and mouth when social distancing from another individual of at least 6 feet is not possible. Individuals under the age of 4, individuals with trouble breathing, and individuals with a medical condition that prevents them from wearing a facial covering are exempt from this rule. Facial coverings need not be worn in the following circumstances. Number one, if an individual is alone or within 6 feet of only members of his or her household. Number two, if an individual is eating or drinking in compliance with the state of Alaska public health mandates. And number three, an individual is receiving lawful services that cannot be adequately performed while the service provider or the recipient is wearing a mask. That would mean, if you went to a barber to get a beard trim or getting dental work, obviously you can't wear masks when you're doing that any more than when you're eating or drinking. So again, basically, if you're by yourself or with members of your household and you're not, there's no way you're going to get in within 6 feet of anybody else. If you're at a restaurant eating or drinking, if you are getting those lawful services, they said, obviously you don't need a facial covering on. But what they did is they took out all of that specific language about being in a, what was it? Got it here somewhere. It used to talk about a building open to the public on the harbor, on the docks, on the ramps, when you're pumping gas or using gas station amenities, and that was understandably creating some confusion, and so that's all gone now. Just basically, it's the 6 foot thing. If there's no way you're going to be within 6 feet of somebody in the harbor or wherever, you don't need to have a mask on. If there is a chance that you're going to come within 6 feet of somebody, you need to have a mask on. That's the thrust of it as I understand it. You should read it for yourself. If you think I'm misinterpreting that, then definitely read the original documents. I mean, that goes for anything that we talk about here on the program. I'm doing my best to interpret these things and pass them along to you for the benefit of anybody who hasn't read them or didn't hear a meeting or something like that. But going to the source documents, listening to the meetings. If you didn't hear yesterday's special meeting, we've got it on our YouTube channel. It's on the city's YouTube channel, I would presume, archived. So that's always going to be the best way to know what was said and how things were decided and who said what and who voted how and all that sort of stuff. So those are kind of the major developments from yesterday. Cordova is now in sync with the state. It is possible, I don't know how likely, but it is possible that the state could end up making some other change on down the road, and our Cordova policymakers and experts might decide that's not a great thing for Cordova, and we think Cordova should do it differently, in which case we could be operating a little differently from the state. I don't know whether that'll happen. Again, the rule is there. Cordova has a local provision to be able to do that. And in a potential example of that, and it's not to say that this is going to happen, but it's conceivable that if the state was to drop the 14-day quarantine for interstate and international travel, but local authorities thought we really still need that, they could, depending on what the doctors and the IMT and the council and the public provide in the way of input, it says right here in the state's guidance that some Alaskan communities may wish to extend restrictions on non-essential travel into their communities for health reasons. Now, that would not impact essential workers in terms of them being able to do the essential work during a quarantine period. And I'm not a policymaker, so I would leave that to other people to figure out the particulars of it. It's just that door is open if the local authorities want to pursue that. And I haven't heard any talk about doing that, so let's not get the rumor mill started. Oh, JR said that the city's going to keep a travel ban. No, JR didn't say that. In fact, JR's getting a little tired of that kind of thing happening. So to be clear, all I am saying is that there is a process for that kind of thing. There is a process for it if that is the will of the doctors and the IMT and the council and the public. Now, moving along to something entirely different. I was hoping this would be a short show, and it has been. Cordova School District Food Service Program Announcement Number 2 for summer food service distribution. How about that, Sandy? Keeping things moving along. Beginning Tuesday the 26th, which is already behind us, and lasting through Tuesday, August 11th, the grab-and-go meals will continue to be available for pickup at Mount Eccles Elementary School main entrance between the hours of 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. At that time, parents, guardians, and/or students may pick up their 5 breakfast and 5 lunch servings for each child in the household. Food service staff will be there during this time to welcome people, tally the meals, answer questions, and assist as needed. Grab-and-go meal items will be placed in bags on a convenient self-serve table just outside the main doors. Each bag will contain 1 ready-to-heat meal, lunch meats, cheese, bread, as well as 5 fruit, 5 vegetable, and 5 milk servings each for breakfast and lunch. Food service staff will monitor distribution and check off children's names on a meal roster similar to the regular routine during the school day. Please follow the process listed below to help maintain health and safety standards for all. The process is all families will have the pickup time from 10 a.m. to 1 a.m. every Tuesday. Meals are available for any child age 0 to 18, including those who are not Cordova School District students or families. You're asked to approach the main doors from the upper staircase, pick up the meals, and then exit foot traffic toward the harbor. And I'm pretty sure they have signs and descriptions for how that works. So everybody comes in one way and goes out another. So, of course, people aren't crossing each other, coming and going. Maintain at least 6 feet from others if waiting in line. Mask coverings are recommended and encouraged. And I guess I would add to that per the city rules, they are probably a little more strongly needed than just recommended and encouraged. Because again, if there's a lot of people around, you need to have the mask on according to the local rule. But if you're there basically by yourself, then, it's the same thing. And then the final bullet point here is no public access to the building for any reason. The letter goes on to say, we're appreciative of the waiver issued by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which facilitates the National Child Nutrition Programs, extending the distribution of meals throughout the summer during COVID-19, which allows parents to take meals off campus on behalf of their children. We'll continue to keep you informed with any updates to the Grab-and-Go Meals program on our webpage and on social media should they change. And obviously, Sandy intends for it to be on the radio too, because here I have the announcement, which was emailed into my presence. So I'm going to stick radio in there too. Food distribution days will be every Tuesday through August 11th and may be subject to change based on state and/or local health mandates. Thank you for your continued support. Signed, Sandy, Director of Food Services, and also Superintendent Russin. So you see, not all the news is creepy. Actually, a lot of good news here today. Reopening of the business community to a much closer state to normal. Still not 100% normal, but normaler. Mask rules still in place, which I know not everybody loves, but virtually every state health professional is on board with it. I'm hoping actually to have a talk show. I don't know if we'll be able to swing it for Friday morning. We might. If not, hopefully Monday, where we'll visit with Dr. Sanders and maybe Dr. Rush about the whole issue of face covering, how to use them, how to make them work, what is it that they do, what are they for, because that's been confusing, particularly, in the early days of the pandemic. And I know this is a rerun for a lot of you, but you'll remember as the health officials were first kind of realizing that this was a problem, the WHO and the CDC, they were initially against masks. I think in large part because the benefit that they would provide to a person to keep them from catching it was not spectacular. Plus, they didn't want people buying up all the masks that the frontline healthcare, all the N95s and the surgical masks, because at that time in this thing, back in whatever, March, is that when it was? February, March, wherever in there, everybody kind of, a lot of states and to an extent the feds got caught with their pants down. They weren't ready for something like this, and there were not stockpiles of this protective equipment. So they wanted to make sure that the people most at risk on the front lines, namely the healthcare workers, would have enough. And, the science didn't support masks offering an individual protection for themselves. What happened, of course, is the whole thing, as the pandemic response evolved, is that, so many people were making the cloth face masks that it seemed like the healthcare authorities realized, oh, okay, well, people are making their own, and there is a decent chance, as they continued to study this particular virus and how it's transmitted, they came to believe, obviously, at the CDC at least, I still don't know where the WHO is on this, but the CDC at least and our domestic folks came to realize, as they gained more knowledge of the virus, that there was a very good chance that even though if I wear a mask, it doesn't protect me, my wearing of a mask could protect you, could protect others. So it was the difference between ingress and egress of particles. So it was something that you could do to help keep other people safe. And Dr. Sanders said some interesting things on that subject in the council meeting yesterday, and I wanted to provide a forum for her to expand on that a little more. So texts were exchanged, and we're hoping to have a show for you on that, perhaps as soon as tomorrow in this time slot. Might have to wait till Monday. We'll see how things go. And it might be Dr. Sanders and Dr. Rush if we can all get our clocks to chime at the same time. We'll see. But anyway, Cordova face covering rule, as amended, still in effect. Business operations are now in sync with the state. Remember, any business that's open, another local provision that's important, any business that wants to be open needs to have their mutual aid agreement on file with the city. And those are very easily downloaded from the city website. It doesn't take all that long to fill out. We have ours. Took us like 5 minutes. Now, it's easier for us because we don't have the contact with the public. But basically what you're doing is by signing that agreement, is you're saying that you understand some minimum things that are necessary. You can add to those minimums, of course, but you understand what the Cordovan policymakers expect in terms of mitigation efforts from any local business, essential, non-essential. I don't think it matters. I think if I remember right, and you can check me on that because I could be remembering it wrong, and I admit that, but I'm virtually certain that it's any business that wants to operate, regardless of the type of business, needs to have a mutual aid agreement. So don't be caught without one of those on file. Again, it doesn't take that much time, and I think it helps with contact tracing and just being able to be sure that people understand at a minimal level what we're facing. So go forth and do business safely. Keep the face covering rule in mind. Thank you for joining us for the town meeting program for Thursday, May 28th. If you missed anything or want to listen to it again or want to share this show with somebody else, it will be archived shortly on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Cordova TV. A brainchild of Robbie Lewis, who knows the internet things. youtube.com/Cordova TV. Thanks, Cordova Wireless Communications, for the sponsorship of this program. They make it possible for us to do this. If you ever have an idea for a show, please feel free to share that. Email it, Facebook it, whatever. If there's somebody you think we ought to talk to, a perspective that ought to be shared, we encourage people to write. If there's something you'd like read during this time slot, that's how it's been for years and years and years. It's come more sharply into focus lately because of what's been going on, but that has not changed. The rest of the 10 a.m. hour programming that we bumped will be lined up and played for you. And we will see you next time on KLAM's Town Meeting Talk Show.